Hi there, I'm Mark Pell, along with Paul Sardarelli. He's the pastor of Trinity here in Mentor. He gave me a little history about, I've known him for 25 years. He gave me a little history about his love for Christ and where it began. And became a believer in college at Kent State. And then you started like crazy studying Greek.
Yes, I did.
That's wonderful.
I grew up bilingual because I always knew Italian.
Yeah.
So languages sort of came easy to me. And I felt like, okay, if I'm going to really read this Bible, let me read it in the original language. So I took classical Greek at Kent State. And
went off to the Dallas Seminary, which I think is the greatest in the country. But, you know.
It's a good one. There are other good ones, too.
Mm. Okay.
Can I just say one thing, though? We did a series on the Bible. I do read the Bible from the New Testament. If you have an English Bible that you read from, it is a great translation. You don't need to know Greek to read your Bible. Read your English Bible, enjoy it. And
is it called English Standard? ESV?
There's the ESV. This is the CSB, the Christian Standard Bible. The NIV is a good Bible. The New King James is a good Bible. So we've been so blessed in America with translations that no one should have any excuse to not read the Bible.
I worship one of my Bibles. It's I bring that up because they were talking about idolatry.
Yeah.
I have to tell you a quick story. Amy and I were looking for a house about, 20, maybe 30 years ago. And we went into this one house. It was the house I wanted, but unfortunately we got outbid. And over the bed in the bedroom was a painting of Jesus. And I thought, boy, I'd be covering up that painting a lot.
You'd have no kids.
I couldn't, that made me, it made me question where I am.
Yes.
You know?
Okay, so subject of idols then. I mean, in a sense, a painting of Jesus. There are some Christian traditions, some even Reformed traditions, of which we're pretty close to, that do not allow any sort of depiction of Jesus or Mary or anybody because of the commandment, you shall not have false gods before me. Right. That's our topic, and yet I bet you don't have any small little statues of gods. So an idol doesn't have to be that painting or a statue of God. And I think I told you earlier, whenever I go to India, it's very common to see a guy go by in a pickup truck, and on his dashboard, he might have Vishnu and Krishna and several other statues. Or you go by a gas station, and the whole front of it will be lined with various and sundry Hindu gods. And
I heard they bless Tatas or whatever those cars are.
Oh, probably so. Yeah. Very Hindu, yeah. The founder of that company. But you don't have to be believing in a polytheistic religion to be into idolatry or into idols. I'm pretty sure you and I and you have a good number of idols if we're not careful as well.
Okay, so let's get into that because it's kind of important. You think that you're a statue of Jesus or a painting or some idol on your dashboard, but there are so many other idols.
Yeah, I think so.
That's the interesting thing about this. I mean, I'm dying to get a new car. So I'm finding a lot of times on the web looking for the car I want.
What are you looking for?
A VW Sport Wagon all Drive or whatever.
Oh, I love it.
The longest name in the world, but it's a beautiful car. Anyway, but my point is, I can find myself doing that. I get myself looking at my watch and I want that watch. And look and that's beautiful.
You bought me that watch.
Oh, I did?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm like you. This can be an idol for me too. And yet, okay, a car and a watch are not necessarily idols in and of themselves. No. It's more what we put into them, or maybe what we're trying to get out of them. I had a quote from Calvin. I want you to interact with it. John Calvin, the great reformer, right at the beginning of his Institutes, which is his 2-volume theology. He says, the human heart is a factory of idols. I grew up in the Warren Youngstown area. I know all about factories. Boy, do they smell, by the way. The human heart is a factory of idols. Every one of us is, from his mother's womb, expert in inventing idols. Every one of us.
Which is more proof that we are sinners, that we are born sinners.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And isn't it also proof then, not only were we born sinners, we're born religious.
Oh, yeah.
We need a God.
So we attach ourselves to something.
We'll make one up if we have to.
Very good. Okay. Does that mean that he was invented because we needed him?
Friedrich Nietzsche would say so.
No.
Karl Marx would say so.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, they would say we needed something transcendent beyond us to either give us meaning or what Marx would say is to keep the masses in line. And so that's why he called religion the opiate of the people. It kept everybody sedate. So yes, if we're atheistic politicians, yes, we invented God for our own purposes.
But the thing I'm leading to is the fact that our God is the only power that can pull away from our idols, that can make us into the person that we're supposed to be and not be laden with all the idols we're going after.
Yeah,
and I believe that there's a weight to this idolatry that we carry.
Right. And yet he knew, let's start from the beginning. The 10 commandments go right off the bat and God says, I am the Lord your God. You will not have false gods. The English literally says before me, which in many ways is gives us a good beginning of what an idol is.
Interesting.
It's a false god, but it's also a priority thing. It's something we lend devotion to, allegiance to, before God. Before, as in standing before, or actually before God, before he enters into the picture? Yeah, I took it that way as a priority. You know, I've got work, family, money, Volkswagen, God. Okay. And so in as much as I depend on those things, not so much for time, but for attention, devotion before God. Okay. So now that we've kind of put an explanation as to what idols are, what do we do next? I think we have to take it out of the abstract. We've got to take us to September, October 2021 and say, okay, what are those idols? How do we identify them? And how can we look at them in our own life? And I like to often say, okay, if an idol is something before God, we prioritize him before God and we have him replace God. What are we replacing him for? And I identified several things. Where do I find meaning? So I find my meaning in life through whatever, we can talk about what these are, or purpose. What's my purpose in life? Where do I find my identity? Boy, we live in a day where identity is huge. And then fourth, also huge today, is truth. So either I find meaning, purpose, identity, truth in God himself and in his scriptures, or I find meaning, purpose, identity, truth in something else. That to me is the essence of idolatry. Where when I find those things in something other than God, then let's chase that rabbit hole and find, okay, where am I getting my meaning? Where am I finding my purpose? Where am I finding my identity? Or where am I finding my truth? Does that make sense? Sure. I mean, as I was sharing with you before we started this little recording, that I look at the clock, let's say the daily clock, and I found myself yesterday looking on the web for this new car or shoes. That was really worthwhile. What I could have been doing at that time was devoting my time to him. And yet, let me push back. You need a car. Yeah. Well, so you have to spend some time going for the best deal or whatever, right? Right. But I was drooling. Okay. So if you find your identity in that Volkswagen Golf, whatever it is, beautiful, preferably red with camel interior, with 19-inch wheels, 4-wheel drive. Oh yeah, am I starting to drive? See, in a sense, that's the line that we draw. We need these. I need a watch, although people don't wear watches anymore. They use their phone. But when I spend, you talked me out of a watch not long ago that I had my heart on this watch. I came into some extra money and it was a pretty expensive watch. And, this guy talked me out of it.
And this is the first time he's talked to me since.
So let's step back. Meaning, purpose. Okay, let's go with identity. Okay. We live in a day where people's identity is found in their politics, or here's a bigger one, in their gender, or their gender dysphoria. And so don't call me he or her, call me they. And because now my identity is so important to me and I'm trying to rediscover it, in a sense, that can become idolatry too. What we're saying is to truly have the Lord your God before all other idols is to say God gets to define your identity. Right. Not your gender or dysphoria or whatever, not your politics, not your cable news station. God defines your identity. God defines your purpose. Mm-hmm. You just recently retired. Mm-hmm. How are you doing finding purpose outside of NPR and WKSU and all that?
Actually, it's been tougher than I thought, because
I bet.
I kept praying for quite a few years that I wanted to do everything for him. And I love this more than anything in my retirement, is doing this. I'd like to do more of this, anything that serves him. But I'm closed-minded or whatever reasons, I haven't found enough time to do it. Mm-hmm. You were talking about the two things in particular. You're talking about gender and politics. Mm-hmm. In both cases, you're looking for truth. Who am I truly?
Yeah.
And what is the correct politics? Is conservatism or is progressivism? Which is the truth? You're not going to find truth in any one of those things.
That's right.
There's only one truth, and I keep hammering that away. I think that's important to know. And the only truth there is comes from the only God.
Right. I mean, it becomes clear. Let's go into real other idolatries and religions. Okay, it would be one thing to say, since we started with India, that I get my truth in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay?
Is that a real word?
Yeah, that is. That's their Hindu scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita. Oh, okay. And I'd say, no, we believe you get your truth in the scriptures. Okay, so it's a good one-to-one comparison. If you're of this religion, you get your truth in the Quran if you're Muslim, or you get it in the Bible if you're Christian. Okay, those are competing truths. Okay, take it out of religion, but keep it in idolatry. So do you get your truth from your political party, or do you get your truth from scripture? Now, there can be some, even in the Quran or the scriptures, there can be some blending where there's some similarities. That's understandable. But your absolute truth, where are you getting it? Are you getting it in your identity as a Republican or a Democrat or wherever else you find, or an American? Or are you getting your identity from Christ and the scriptures? That's where the blur happens.
Should we be uncomfortable when we find ourselves so aligned with a particular view, or even a particular person in that view, that we've kind of forgotten what we're supposed to be saying and doing in the name of God?
I think we can. To me, a key word in Christianity is the word transcend. Okay. The Lord not only is a transcendent God, but his truth is meant to transcend not only our lives, but our countries, our politics, our philosophy, our art. In other words, it can speak into each of those things, right, but none of those things can then become the actual reflection of who he is. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So can God speak into conservative politics? Indeed he can. And there is some good truth in some conservative politics. But when people believe those two things become mirrors of each other, that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah, a lot of trouble.
One of the idols of our day is subjectivism, where all truth, everything is true. There is no absolute truth.
Which is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. How can your truth and my truth be truth? If your truth is great and I disagree with you, then...
But that's the world we live in. Total relativism. Ooh. And relativism has become an idol for today. So that relativism Contradictory as it sounds, relativism becomes the idol of truth today. It's like, yeah, but that's saying there is no truth.
But there is no truth in today if that's the case.
That's the society we live in.
We've become our own little gods. So therefore, my God, me,
yes,
with my view, is valuable.
Right. So I become self-determinative, and that too becomes an idol, so that I get to determine my own meaning, and I get to determine my own purpose. I get to determine my own identity, and I get to determine my own truth. And in a sense, I think you hit the nail on the head. The ultimate idol of today is me. We've become so narcissistic. We've become so sort of self-involved that I'm my own idol. So all of these other smaller gods are meant to feed this God, me.
I don't know if this really has much to do with it. I know we have to close things up, but I thought it was interesting. The other night I was watching on PBS a documentary on the Kurds that have been in the middle of fighting for and to cut a long story short, there were 150 people who were crossing a line into another country, and literally it was like a line in the sand, because that's all there was rock and sand. There wasn't anything around, no buildings, anything.
Hopefully a good gust of wind doesn't come and blur the line.
These people are begging to get into this country across that line. They have no food, they have no water, they have no jobs, they have no shelter, they have nothing. And
How sad.
I know it. These people are begging for something that they can hold on to that will give them a new start, a new life. And here you and I are just unbelievably spoiled.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but what's funny is
complaining about my car has too many miles on it.
Right. And I'm complaining that I don't like the car I'm driving. I want a new one. What's wrong with the car I have? We are our society is so spoiled that we have a million idols. And we've forgotten the most important one.
And that's why we're doing this series. We think this is a real issue that faces real people. Well, Calvin said it from the moment we were born. Real quick, and throughout our shows, I want to remind us of this, just to end with what I think is a little bit of something to think through, to sort of confront your idol. Okay? The first, just 3 steps in a sense. First of all, is to identify it. To identify my idol, it might be materialism, it might be my car, it might be my watch. It's probably me, but to identify the idol, to say it out loud, name it. And maybe if you have a good friend like I have, Mark, tell your friend, identify it. Second step, pray. First of all, confess your sin. The Lord has clearly said, I am the Lord your God. You will not have false gods before you. Confess your sin. Lord, I have so many false gods before you. I am sorry.
Whether you confess them or not.
It totally knows them. The other part of that prayer would then be, please change my heart. If my idol is toward materialism, change my heart to love people more than things. Break my heart for the Kurds or Afghanistan, people in Afghanistan. Break my heart over what breaks yours instead of wanting all these things. So identify it, pray, and then thirdly, replace it. And this is where God needs to help as well. But replace that idol ultimately with the true God, with Christ. And I think that comes through reading the truth, with being in fellowship with other believers, both in a smaller context, like with me and Mark, but also in your church fellowship. And then continually let the truth of God and the fellowship of his people begin to change your heart and replace that idol with Christ himself. We'll say it again and again throughout this series.
Yeah, we have 2 more programs, and we probably should have a lot more on that, especially when you're talking about it with me, but we won't get into that right now. 2 more on idolatry. So we hope that you'll join us. Until then, thank you.